Apologize to my wife or get out. David's voice cut through the chatter of the backyard barbecue. I looked at my son, standing by the grill with the tongs in his hand, trying to look authoritative. Next to him stood Sarah, his wife of 3 years, arms crossed and a smug smile resting on her face. A few neighbors lowered their drinks, pretending not to listen. The afternoon sun beat down on the patio, making the silence feel even heavier. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I simply looked at the two of them, taking in the sheer audacity of the moment. 10 minutes earlier, Sarah had loudly ordered me to clear the dirty paper plates from the guest tables. When I calmly suggested she could handle it since she was the one hosting her friends, she threw a fit. She announced to everyone that since David paid for the roof over my head, the least I could do was help out. I corrected her quietly, mentioning that this was my house. That was when David marched over and gave me his ultimatum. I didn't argue. I picked up my purse from the patio table, walked through the side gate, and headed straight for the driveway. My silver BMW beeped as I unlocked it. I slipped into the driver's seat and started the engine. As I shifted into reverse, the reality of the situation finally seemed to register. In the rearview mirror, I saw Sarah running down the driveway in her wedges, waving her hands frantically. "Leave the car!" she screamed, her face flushed with panic and anger. "Leave the car right now!" She honestly believed the BMW in the 4-bedroom house sitting on a half-acre lot behind her belonged to David. I rolled up the window, turned up the radio, and pulled smoothly out of the neighborhood. The drive away from my own home felt surprisingly peaceful. I didn't shed a tear. At 62, I had survived the loss of my husband and built a quiet, comfortable life. I had no energy left to waste on manufactured drama. 2 years ago, David and Sarah asked to move in. They claimed they wanted to save money for a down payment on their own place. My house was large, mostly empty since my husband passed, and I wanted to help my son. I gave them the master suite upstairs while I moved into the smaller downstairs bedroom. Almost immediately, Sarah began treating the house as her own. She rearranged my furniture, threw out my vintage curtains, and hosted loud dinners without asking. David never stopped her. He would pull me aside and whisper, "Just let her have this. Mom, she likes to feel in charge." I tolerated it because I preferred peace over conflict. I stayed quiet when Sarah bragged to her friends about their beautiful home. I stayed quiet when she complained about having to share her space with her mother-in-law, gripping the leather steering wheel of the BMW. I realized my silence had not bought peace. It had only bought them the illusion of ownership. David had clearly woven a complex web of lies to impress his wife, and he had used my assets to do it. I pulled into the parking lot of a quiet coffee shop on the edge of town. The evening air was cooling down. I ordered a black coffee, sat in a corner booth, and opened my banking app on my phone. If David had lied about the house and the car, I needed to know exactly how far the delusion went. A notification popped up at the top of my screen. It was a text from David, demanding to know where I took his vehicle. I stared at David's text message for a long moment before swiping it away. I did not reply. Instead, I logged into my primary checking account. My husband and I had always been careful with our finances. The house was completely paid off. The BMW was bought with cash from an old investment fund. David knew this. But as I reviewed the joint account I had opened to share grocery expenses with him and Sarah, my stomach tightened. The balance was entirely gone. Over the past week, David had transferred the remaining $3,000 out of the grocery fund to cover the catering, the new patio furniture, and the expensive grill for their barbecue. He had spent my money to host a party where I was treated like the hired help. I took a slow sip of my coffee. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt a cold, sharp clarity. With a few taps on my screen, I transferred all my remaining funds from any connected accounts into a secure, private account in my name only. I navigated to the credit card dashboard. David had an authorized user card on my account for emergencies. I clicked the button to deactivate it instantly. Finally, I opened the utility company apps. The electricity, water, and internet were all set to autopay from my accounts. I canceled the auto payments and requested to disconnect the services in my name by the end of the week. I finished my coffee and walked back to the car. I had no intention of returning to that house tonight, or ever again under the same conditions. I drove to a comfortable hotel downtown, checked into a suite, and turned my phone to silent. Tomorrow, they would wake up to a very different reality. I woke up to the quiet hum of the hotel air conditioner. The bed was comfortable, and for the first time in 2 years, I didn't hear Sarah's heavy footsteps pacing above my ceiling. I ordered room service, enjoying a plate of fresh fruit and a croissant while looking out over the city. When I finally took my phone off silent, I had 14 missed calls. 12 were from David. 2 from Sarah. There was also a string of text messages. The first text from David arrived at 7:30 a.m. "Mom, why is my card declining? I'm at the coffee shop." The second, at 8:10 a.m. "Did you cancel my card? Call me back right now." Then came a message from Sarah at 8:45 a.m. "David told me what you did with the accounts. You are being completely unreasonable. Bring the car back, or I am changing the locks on the house today." I smiled slightly at her threat. She couldn't change the locks without the homeowner's authorization, and the security company knew my voice. I didn't write a long, emotional paragraph. I typed a simple, factual response to David. "You told me to get out. I did. I will no longer fund your lifestyle. Please do not contact me again unless it is an absolute emergency." I hit send and placed the phone face down on the table. They had built a fantasy life on my dime. And they were angry that the ATM had finally walked away. I picked up my laptop and searched for short-term luxury apartment rentals. If I was going to move out of my own house, I was going to do it on my terms. I found a beautiful, fully furnished condo near the waterfront. Then, I dialed the number of an old friend who owned a local real estate agency. I waited until 11:00 a.m. on Tuesday to drive back to the house. I knew David and Sarah would both be at their office jobs. The driveway was empty. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house was a mess from the barbecue. Sticky plates were stacked in the sink, and empty bottles cluttered the countertops. I ignored it all and walked straight to my downstairs bedroom. I didn't need a moving truck. I only needed my important documents, my jewelry, and a few suitcases of clothes. Everything else in the house was just furniture. While looking for my spare passport in the hall closet, I noticed a glossy folder sitting on the console table. The label read, "Kitchen and Master Bath Remodel." I opened it. Sarah had drawn up extensive plans to tear out my kitchen and expand the upstairs bathroom. At the bottom of the quote was a financing plan, relying heavily on a home equity loan. They couldn't take out a loan against a house they didn't own. But the absolute nerve it took to plan the demolition of my home behind my back was staggering. I gathered the folder, my folders from the safe, and my suitcases, placing them neatly by the front door. I loaded the first batch into the trunk of the BMW. As I walked back inside to grab the last suitcase, The sound of a key turning in the front door echoed through the hall. The door pushed open, and Sarah walked in, balancing a tray of iced coffees. She froze when she saw me standing in the foyer with my luggage. "What are you doing here?" she snapped, dropping her keys on the table. "I thought David told you to stay away until you were ready to apologize." "I'm packing my things." "Sarah," I replied, my voice completely steady. She crossed her arms, her eyes darting to the suitcases. "Good. Maybe some time in a cheap motel will teach you how to respect the people who put a roof over your head. Leave the car keys on the counter before you go." I didn't argue. Instead, I unzipped the front pocket of my tote bag and pulled out a thick envelope. I slipped out the most recent property tax bill and the vehicle registration. I handed them to her. Sarah frowned, looking down at the papers. She read the top line, then the second. Her face paled. "What is this?" she asked, her voice losing its sharp edge. "That is the property tax bill for this house, paid in full by me," I said. "And the registration for the BMW. Both are entirely in my name. David does not own this house. He does not own the car. He has been living rent-free in my home for 2 years." Sarah stared at the documents as if they were written in a foreign language. "No, David bought this house before we got married. He pays the mortgage." "There is no mortgage, Sarah. My late husband and I paid it off a decade ago." She stepped back, her iced coffee shaking slightly in her hand. The confident, controlling woman from the barbecue was completely gone, replaced by someone watching her entire reality fracture. Before she could form a sentence, tires crunched in the driveway. A moment later, David rushed through the front door, looking breathless and panicked. He saw Sarah holding the tax papers, and he saw me holding my car keys. He knew instantly that the game was over. "Mom, put the bags down." David rushed forward, holding his hands up like he was trying to calm a startled animal. "Sarah, don't look at that. Mom is just upset. We can sit down and talk about this privately." Sarah didn't look at him. She kept her eyes glued to the paper in her hand. "David," she whispered, "whose name is on the deed to this house?" David swallowed hard. He looked at me, pleading silently. "Please, let this pass." Just like he always did. He wanted me to absorb his lie so he could keep his comfortable life. I picked up my last suitcase. "I'll let you two sort this out," I said. "Mom, please." David stepped in front of the door. "You can't just leave and ruin my marriage. Just tell her it was a misunderstanding." "I didn't ruin anything. David, you built a marriage on a foundation of lies using my money." I stepped around him. He didn't try to physically stop me. "By the way, the utilities will be shut off in my name on Friday. You'll need to set up your own accounts." "We can't afford the utilities right now," David blurted out. "You know my check goes to the car lease Sarah just got." Sarah finally spun around, her eyes blazing. "You told me you made enough to cover everything. You told me this was your house." I walked out the front door, leaving them standing in the foyer. The sound of Sarah's voice rising in anger echoed out onto the front porch. I didn't stop to listen. I loaded the last bag into the trunk, closed it firmly, and drove away. I had an appointment with a real estate agent at 2 o'clock, and I didn't want to be late. By Wednesday afternoon, I had unpacked my bags in a beautiful, light-filled condo overlooking the river. I had signed a 6-month lease, paid up front. My new space was quiet, clean, and completely mine. I spent the morning drinking tea on the balcony and reading a book. My phone remained silent. I had blocked Sarah entirely and set David's notifications to hide. Back at the house, My actions were speaking louder than any argument ever could. I didn't need to evict them or drag them to court. I simply told my realtor friend, Joanne, to list the property. I gave her my spare set of keys and full permission to show the house. Joanne worked fast. By Thursday morning, a large wooden for sale sign was hammered into the front lawn. I didn't have to be there to know the chaos it caused. Joanne called me later that afternoon, chuckling quietly. I went over to take the interior photos. Joanne reported, "Your daughter-in-law was packing boxes in the living room, crying. David tried to tell me I couldn't put the sign up. I just showed him the listing agreement with your signature." The neighbors, the ones Sarah had bragged to for years, were undoubtedly watching from their windows. The illusion of the successful young couple graciously hosting their elderly mother had evaporated overnight. They couldn't afford to buy the house from me, and they couldn't afford market rent in that neighborhood. The reality of their financial situation had finally caught up to them. As I watched the sun set over the river from my balcony, the doorbell to my condo rang. I wasn't expecting any visitors. I opened the door, leaving the chain engaged. David stood in the hallway. He looked exhausted, wearing the same wrinkled shirt he had on the day before. "How did you find me?" I asked, my voice flat. "Joanne told me you were staying near the river," he mumbled, looking at the floor. "Mom, please, let me in." I unlatched the chain and opened the door, but I did not step aside. "What do you want?" "David." He rubbed his face. "Sarah left. She went to stay with her sister. She says she can't be married to someone who lied about everything. The realtor has people coming to look at the house tomorrow. I have nowhere to go." He looked at me with the same puppy dog eyes he used when he was 10 years old and broke a window. He expected me to fix it. He expected me to offer the spare bedroom in my new condo. "I'm sorry about your marriage, David," I said gently. "But you are 32 years old. You made your choices." "I just need a place to crash for a few weeks," he pleaded. "Just until I get my own apartment. Please, Mom." "No." The word felt incredibly light coming out of my mouth. David blinked, shocked. "You're turning your own son away. I am letting you take responsibility for your own life." I corrected him. "I love you, David, but I will not be your safety net while you disrespect me. You have a job. You can rent a studio." I didn't wait for him to argue. I stepped back and closed the door. I locked the deadbolt, walked into my quiet living room, and poured myself a glass of wine. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. 3 months later, the house sold to a lovely young family for over the asking price. The funds cleared directly into my private account. I didn't buy another large house. I liked my condo. I liked the lack of yard work, the security, and the simple fact that the only person making a mess in the kitchen was me. I took the BMW on a 2-week road trip up the coast, stopping at bed and breakfasts, visiting old friends, and reading on the beach. I didn't feel lonely. I felt liberated. I met my neighbor, Susan, for coffee when I returned. She gave me the neighborhood updates. Sarah had officially filed for divorce, claiming she was a victim of financial deception. David had moved into a tiny, one-bedroom apartment near his office. He actually came by the old house to pick up a package that was delivered by mistake, Susan told me, stirring her tea. He looked humbled, said he was working overtime to pay off his credit cards. I nodded, feeling a quiet sense of relief. Taking away my financial support hadn't destroyed my son. It had finally forced him to grow up. David texted me on my birthday a few weeks later. It wasn't a demand or a request for money. It was just a simple, happy birthday. "Mom, I miss you. I'm trying to do better." I replied with a simple, "Thank you." I didn't invite him over. I didn't offer to pay for dinner. Reconciliation, if it ever happened, would take time. And it would happen on my terms. I picked up my car keys and walked out the door. The sun was shining, the breeze was cool, and my time belonged entirely to me.